does Hamas have a record of summarily killing civilians, of just going after civilians? Because you plan that out. You have to indoctrinate those fighters.
Welcome back to Crossroad Conversations. Today, we continue our analysis of the Hamas-Israel conflict, guided by the expertise of Dr. Mikhail Troitskiy, a renowned authority on Eurasian security and Russian foreign policy. Dr. Troitskiy is a professor of Russian studies at the University of Wisconsin-Madison's Department of Political Science. His extensive writings encompass the Russia-Ukraine war and delve deeply into the evolving nature of strategic stability in U.S.-Russian dialogues and beyond. Stay tuned to catch the surprising parallels with the Russia-Ukraine war and discover why understanding global events is more crucial now than ever. I hope you enjoy. From your perspectives as an expert in Eurasian security, do you see any parallels between the strategies or tactics employed in the recent Gaza Hamas-Israel conflict and those observed in the Ukraine-Russia war?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and we are stepping into politically sensitive territory here. But one thing we can impartially observe is that both Hamas and some of the groups of the fighters that Russia deployed on the battlefront with Ukraine are indeed paramilitary groups. And paramilitary groups are strikingly similar in their tactics. So there are indeed conspiracy theories with some observers claiming that they see a footprint of, for example, Russia's Wagner paramilitary group in Gaza or in Israel as they watch the videos and the photos of the Hamas attack in Israel. But clearly, paramilitary groups use similar tactics. They are all reckless. They tend to not to value the lives of their fighters. Their fighters are often indoctrinated. They are sometimes under duress. They are sent into the fight using, pressure and avert physical threats. In the case of Hamas, I think it's more about indoctrination, religious indoctrination.
Right.
But some of it we have indeed seen in the Russia-Ukraine war. And then, of course, Russia got stuck in Ukraine, having advanced into Ukrainian territory, and the same may happen in Gaza. Well, at least the same situation happened with Israel in both Lebanon and Gaza a number of times already. So where there's no lightning strike and a blitzkrieg, there you get stuck. And in the case of Israel, Israeli forces had to pull out, having achieved their goals only in part, and then they faced an assault, a new one, and then they went in again, and then they got stuck again. So this time, the Israelis apparently do not want to repeat those mistakes and are bracing for a much heavier offensive. But the situation so far have been somewhat similar, but I mean, it's been similar with many other cases of armed conflict, state versus paramilitary, or state versus state in human history. So it's not unique to Israel, Hamas on one hand, and Russia, Ukraine on the other. And finally, I'd say images of civilian casualties will be hard to avoid in Gaza.
Yeah, of course.
And of course, you've seen many of those in Ukraine. So there will be inevitable comparisons of civilian infrastructure being hit in Gaza and in Ukraine, despite the clear fact that Israel, unlike Russia, was not the one who started the war, who perpetrated an act of aggression. But again, as impartial observers, we need to acknowledge that reactions by the international community to civilian infrastructure being damaged is more or less the same in all cases.
Okay, that leads me to a next question. That this is something that I really want to ask you because I'm trying to understand it myself. So, we have different groups classifying the fighters of Hamas and the people who committed the crimes, militant or terrorist. And from my own research, militants are groups that take up arms or willing to engage in conflict to promote an ideological idea or a political or religious cause of some sort. And then that's all of militants. And then there's a subcategory of militants, which are terrorists, which are willing to openly target civilians in order to instill terror to promote their cause. And this was really interesting to me as I've been following the Ukraine-Russia conflict or war. I understand, I think, at least from my understanding, that the Israelis are targeting buildings that are in civilian areas, residential buildings, because at least we understand that those buildings are housing rockets or missiles that are being shot into Israel. However, Russia is firing on residential buildings, I think, all the time. And I don't think that those buildings are firing or housing any sort of military or shooting missiles into Russia from those buildings in Ukraine. Can you talk to me through, I would imagine we aren't calling Russians terrorists because it's an actual government entity, but just any thoughts you have on this, because it's just sort of an interesting that I'm trying to observe and understand.
Yeah, there's indeed this notion of war crimes that I think, for example, the U.S. government uses in characterizing, the shelling of apartment houses. That is really, blood curdling when you see it done in Ukraine. So, of course, the main there are two main distinctions of what has been happening in Ukraine, between what has been happening in Ukraine over the last year and a half on one hand, and this potential operation by Israel in Gaza and maybe elsewhere. The first one, again, is that Israel clearly did not start this this war. And in that case, it does not take full responsibility for anything that happens. And then the second is, of course, the systematic character of Russia's efforts to eliminate civilian infrastructure in Ukraine. So when you send missiles at some elements of the electrical grid in Ukraine, or again, you shall just apartment house districts in a place like Kharkov, then of course, and you do it months and months on end. This is different from a relatively fast operation that is driven by clear goals and basically in a situation when Israel says it just needs to take care of Hamas infrastructure. But again, that said, of course, Gaza is a very, very densely populated area, and much really depends on the planning of that Israeli operation, if it is to start. And I think there are ways to try and avoid casualties. And I think, and surely Israel is on the record, warning civilians to leave buildings before it strikes. It might not be able to abide by this rule all the time over the next weeks or months, but still there has never been lack of trying, and Russia has never done that in Ukraine because it would really it would have been very difficult to explain what Russia is doing, other than just causing wanton damage to Ukraine and trying to intimidate its population.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very difficult thing because we don't have to dive into this too deeply, but it's tough because you can sympathize with the Palestinian people who are trying to remain where their family has always lived in the region of Gaza particularly, and them not wanting to leave. You can also sympathize that, from my understanding, Hamas is telling them not to leave, that like stay where you are and become a martyr, or if the Israelis do bomb like this area. So there's some things that are happening right there that make this very complicated. But it sort of ties well into the next question. So both the Ukraine-Russia war and the current Hamas-Israel conflict involve disputed territories and questions of sovereignty. How do you view the international community's role in response to these situations, especially considering the power dynamics at play?
Clearly, to jump straight into it, Israel has not been very vocal condemning Russia for its war in Ukraine, because Israel has been facing similar criticism of holding on to the territories that Israel has long been asked to withdraw from.
West Bank and Gaza.
And yeah, well, it did withdraw from Gaza, and there you go. That's what you get, having withdrawn from a territory that is densely populated by militants. But in the West Bank, the situation is more complicated. But again, the main difference here is that Israel, back in 1967, when it went into the West Bank, it was facing imminent threats from its neighbors. And now Russia faced no such threat, no conceivable threat from Ukraine. It was just a complete war of choice. Ukraine never declared the goal of eliminating Russia, of throwing Russia into the sea or something.
Right.
And in that regard, Russia's invasion of Ukraine was completely unprovoked, as was the annexation of Ukrainian territory. So that's the main legal difference in this case. And then Israel has been closely allied with the United States, and that alliance strengthened exactly after the 1967 war. So Israel has been enjoying massive U.S. support, and it prospered and became a confident military power in the Middle East, in large part thanks to that support. So again, situations are quite different, and Israel has been trying to handle and resolve the fundamental dispute behind the West Bank and Gaza, the Palestinian territories, and some progress was being made at during different periods in the history of that conflict. While Russia's annexation of Ukrainian territory is very recent, and as of now, Russia has not been willing to negotiate on terms other than just keeping the territories that it incorporated and wants to hold on to.
So, for the last numbers I've seen, I think they may be a few months old now, but the last numbers I saw, the U.S. has sent around $75 billion of aid to Ukraine in some form or manner. I am curious your thoughts on if that's not enough, if it's too much, and what you think we might wisely should do for Israel. I ask because one of the central things I'm noticing between American Republicans and Democrats, or conservatives and liberals right now, is the interest of isolationism. Not saying something that I agree with or disagree with, but I am noticing potentially fatigue of seeing homelessness and different issues happening in the domestic United States, and then seeing the money that we're sending to other countries to try and help. I'm really curious your thoughts, just as an expert, on the aid we've given to Ukraine. Has it been enough, or your thoughts on it? And then could we learn anything, or could we do more or less to support Israel? What do you think?
So one trend that has become clear over the last months and maybe even weeks is that in the United States, there's a debate ongoing as to what the expectations should be by the United States of Ukraine's progress, relying on the aid that the U.S. Has been supplying to Ukraine. So there's I wouldn't call it doubting the need to continue helping Ukraine, but clearly politics does reflect the moods, not just of the common folks, but also of larger groups of experts, let's say, or influencers, or maybe even sponsors, who directly impact policy and who want to make a contribution to policy. So it's not just pure politicking going on in the United States. Now, I am not sure whether the United States should have been doing more, and I'm not a military analyst, but I would agree with the U.S. policymakers who say that they've been doing what they think is necessary and best for Ukraine. There are many things, there are many assets and capabilities that the United States is simply unable to provide to Ukraine, and that is, I think, the military personnel. So you in a ground war with masses of infantry involved, it really matters how much people you can call up, how many military personnel you have on the ground, and even the most advanced artillery systems and even aircraft may not be sufficient to take land back in such an operation. But this is a completely unexpert
of course.
view. So this makes me think that the U.S. Has indeed been doing its best. Now the second trend is, of course, this new the threat of a new war that can easily become large scale in the Middle East.
Yeah.
So whether is that going to negatively affect U.S. aid for Ukraine? I'm not sure, as long as we now see Israel aid and Ukraine aid possibly bundled together, which might make it easier to pass those resolutions and even offer a massive package counting in tens of billions of dollars at once to Ukraine, because it will be commensurate with what the United States may want and have support for providing to Israel. So this opens up new opportunities for those in the U.S. who want to step up aid for Ukraine. And finally, that said, is there enough resources? Is there enough, funds available to release to both Ukraine and Israel? And that's a good question. And I think it also concerns the weapons and munitions. There may not be enough to provide to both sides that the United States wants to support, including, for example, those military shells and some of the equipment that is so much in demand already by two U.S. partners. So that, I think, we are going to see, and also much depends still on how U.S. politics works out, whether there's a new speaker in the House, and whether they can get their act together and come up with resolutions in support of both Ukraine and Israel. But of course, the opportunity is there. Some new opportunities have opened up for again those in the U.S. Who would like to support Israel and Ukraine at the same time.
This is a particularly dark quote.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I'm sure you are familiar with. So Stalin once said, "A single death is a tragedy. a million deaths are a statistic. And I think that is getting a little bit to my point in that I think that many Americans, I think, have trouble conceptualizing the tragedy that's happening in many parts of the world right now. And I'm curious, can you give any maybe personal perspective on, does it matter what's happening on the other side of the world? Does it matter to the United States, to regular civilians, people who are working in Idaho? Like, why should they care about what's happening between Russia, Ukraine, or Hamas and Israel?
Yeah, the shortest answer would be to say that it's the question of international order being maintained, being preserved, and people in Idaho should have no doubt about the role of that international order, a relatively peaceful order with plenty of economic interdependence, opportunities for trade, for selling their agriculture produce, for example. So this has always depended on the nature of the international order. And everyone should rest assured that should a major bout of instability in the form of armed conflicts, of threats of use, or realistic threats of use of nuclear weapons emerge across the globe, lives of everyone will be affected. Probably those making money on financial services and other highly scalable businesses will suffer first. But everyone, not just in the United States, but also in the developing countries, will feel the heat of disruption of major trade routes, of the end of major trade deals, opportunities to invest, to grow capital, and so forth. So peace across the globe and the ability of many countries, including first and foremost U.S. allies, to derive the peace dividend, as they call it, is that is all instrumental to the prosperity of many people across the globe, not only to those who are dying in the Middle East or East Europe, but also to those who think life will be the same, whatever the shape of the outside world is. It's not that way, unfortunately, and the United States and other developed countries have been able to become developed and rich because of this particular nature of the international order. And it's so sad that others, like militants in the Middle East or Russian politicians, seem not to fully appreciate it. So they let genie out of the bottle without realizing where it ends up, taking them personally, not just their countries that suffer immensely from the armed conflict that they initiate.
That's amazing. So is it fair to say that supply chains have become so internationally reliant that if a war breaks out, it is going to affect people in Idaho just like it's going to affect people in developing countries and anywhere else in the world? Unless you're living in a very small commune, the international relations are going to affect you.
It's for sure, it's a matter of logistics, but it's also a more fundamental problem of demand for particular goods and services. So there are some services like tourism, for example, that create so much jobs in the United States and globally. And you can think of highly marginal services like banking, and also, of course, the markets, the stock market, which depends on everyone's expectations. It contracts immediately with immediate implications for the ability of the investors to make money, and then deleveraging happens fast. And people start suffering, and many of them would not even understand what's going on. But the fundamental problem will be in the stability of the international order and the disruptive power of the armed conflicts, of serious armed conflicts that are going to affect everyone unless they are contained at an early stage or resolved through apparently sacrifice, and that is just financial sacrifice for the people of the United States, a pretty insignificant one, but that is required if we are to stay on track.
Absolutely. And especially, I don't know if it's true or not, but I've read that Russia has been involved with Iran in terms of being in support of their nuclear development. And if Iran has some ties to Hamas, all these parties do interact in some way or another. And that all goes towards more potential for destabilization. So I really appreciate your time today. This was enlightening for me, at least, and I hope that others will gain something from it. Anything else you'd like to share that you'd like for people to either follow, to just stay up to date with what's going on, stay up to date with your work and what you're doing, or anything else?
Well, I mean, some of the questions you asked were good ones, but I think the answer, there are some exciting answers you can provide to your, for example, second question about Russian influence. Whether I see any indications of Russian influence or involvement in the Israel-Hamas situation.
Well, would you like me to read the question, then you answer it?
Why not? Why not? Yeah.
Why not? I'm glad that you liked it. So absolutely. So yeah, that's wonderful. So okay, so Russia has historically played a role in the Middle Eastern geopolitics. Given the recent conflict between Hamas and Israel and the speculations that Iran will likely help Hamas, do you see any indications of Russian influence or involvement, either directly or indirectly?
One thing that looks plausible is that there must have been a major power that was involved in preparation of such a large-scale surprise assault in a place that I think Israel has long considered very transparent. And it's not, I think it wasn't only that the Israelis assumed that the Gazans didn't want war, they only want some money and some perks. It's also that the Israelis believe that they are capable of seeing bad things coming their way. And why they failed to see it, someone with a significant capability to, say, dazzle Israeli sensors, dazzle its intelligence capabilities may have been involved. I'm not saying this could have been Russia, because it would be highly provocative, and there's no evidence has been presented to that effect. It
Right.
May have been Iran, although Iran has now denied its direct involvement, despite its support for the cause of Hamas and Hezbollah and others. You might think of someone just providing training to those militants who ended up attacking Israel somewhere outside of Gaza, as long as Gaza may indeed have been very transparent to the Israelis. So these guys may have been trained somewhere else, maybe somewhere in the region, and there are probably areas in the region where you can do that. And then you have to smuggle them back into Gaza, and then you have to have enough expertise on Israeli defenses and so forth. So that sort of points to the potential role of a major power. But that said, at the end of the day, we cannot know more than the Israeli side, and also the full reckoning with who missed Gaza will likely not be public. And even if there's a role a major power like Russia was indeed playing in the attack, I think this is something that Israel may want to avoid announcing, and it would also be difficult to show irrefutable evidence without compromising, sources, and that's the usual problem with intelligence. But in this case, politics is also involved, because if you announce that someone is responsible, you are supposed to hold that player responsible, and that may be too high a bar for a country like Israel, which is locked in a fight with a number of regional enemies, to actually take.
Yeah, it's why this is such a complex issue for me to grasp, because the head of Hezbollah, I believe in the past, has said that he hopes that Jews will gather in Israel so they don't have to hunt them down around the world. And Hamas's original forming documentation very clearly stated that they are in support of the extermination of Jews, and having Iran publicly support both Hezbollah and Hamas is an extremely difficult situation for Israel, I would think. That it's I'm not sure if that's as well understood by the general public as I think it probably should be. First of all, does what I just said sound accurate from your understanding, or because I think that's all public?
I think Iran is a factor that has already been baked into Israeli analysis and assessments of their security, and perhaps Iran is somewhat transparent, at least pulling off an operation of that scale, in a place that is not contiguous to Iran, such as Gaza, is difficult, even for Iran. And then Iran has an interest in continuing down the path of normalization, or semblance of normalization, with the United States, and it apparently appreciates the money that is getting back from the United States, and it understands the risks of going, really, detonating, making a nuclear test, or coming out as a nuclear armed power. There are clearly factions in Iran who want all of that, but I don't think the Ayatollahs and the government that the Grand Ayatollah oversees is very much excited about the prospect of an all-out confrontation with Israel. So they may have been sincere in denying their direct involvement. So someone else may have been involved. Again, if Israel says this is something very strange, this couldn't have been pulled off by just Hamas militants, so there's something else. But Israel hasn't been saying that, at least yet. Maybe they are focusing on their retaliatory measures, and the reckoning will come after that. But who knows? I'm not an expert on militant tactics, and you might be able to hide this even in a small territory so densely populated that you have just enough, enough capability, enough people to behind whose backs you can plot such an attack.
Yeah, the stuff I've seen that's been bizarre to me is their ability to maintain complex drone attacks or assaults on like the guard towers among the 30-mile wall, and then the breaches to break the wall, the paragliding to go over it. Like this, all these different fronts that seem rather sophisticated. I think that's why people are suspicious that a larger group help them with it, but I think it's pure speculation, at least from my standpoint. I've no way for me to know.
And then plus, does Hamas have a record of summarily killing civilians, of just going after civilians? Because you plan that out. You have to indoctrinate those fighters, just, telling them it's completely justifiable to kill civilians, even
It's more than
children.
justifiable. And
Yeah.
that's,
So
yeah.
they should do that in Israel, and it takes a serious campaign of indoctrination. So it takes a significant number of preachers, of whoever you call them, war psychologists, to brainwash those fighters. If this was going to be something new for them, then the question naturally arises as to how you can, do that without being detected in a fairly small and transparent space.
Yeah, that's a fascinating take. I one of the videos I watched, a mother in Gaza talked about, a mother in Israel talked about, she actually served soda to the Hamas fighters when they broke into her house, and then when the IDF came, they left and she wasn't murdered. And she said to one of them, like, "Why are you doing this? We are brothers." And his response was, "We are not brothers. I'm a martyr," which is interesting. It's very much.
They've been trained to become martyrs. They were explained that they are already martyrs and that they are probably not coming back. But it's again, I'm not sure. I'm not sure how ISIS trained its militants. But I think this comparison between Hamas and ISIS at this stage, based on their tactics, is indeed justified. But for ISIS, it took quite a few years to actually grow up and mature, and then plan their assault. And they were based in deserts, in a large territory, and I think people actually saw them coalescing, coming together, and maybe realized they were up to something. But that was different. Here it was much better
Concealed,
designed, and planned, and plotted.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Crossroad Conversations. If you found this conversation helpful and enjoy Dr. Mikhail Troitskiy's insights, let me know, as there's a chance we might be able to get him back on the podcast to discuss the Ukraine-Russia war. I hope this was helpful again. Please like, subscribe, and share this video with anybody who you think might find it helpful, and I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you.